So hello once again everyone. So this is the output that we've came up. So this is a certificate program for English education. So our curriculum title is Promoting English Teachers for Effective Communication. And the curriculum description is that this is a one-year program intended to accomplish the requirements for both semester, which is the first semester and second semester. So this program provides an overview and background reading on a core topic in English. This contains the mainstay of learning English, and it is logically arranged at that. So we've developed a 3 hours lecture every week. That includes the activity, of course, and additionally, there are supporting materials for each of the learning areas, such as the handouts with regards to the particular subject, and PowerPoint presentations and illustrations. So, other than that, we will also provide supporting materials to assess the students' learning. That includes the quizzes, worksheet assignments, and major exams. So above all, this program aspires students to stay abreast of the subject knowledge that will ensure the success of this curriculum. So our mission is to create a school where every individual has the tool, support, and learning experiences to thrive and make a significant contribution to the society. And of course, we have the mission on to empower individuals to showcase their full potential in terms of academic performance. And our goals is first to enable learners to become critical thinker in every societal issues, followed by to enable learners to become creative by cultivating cultural innovations. Third, to enable learners to collaborate effectively by stimulating teamwork and communication skills. And lastly, to enable learners to view different perspectives to achieve common goals. So our general objectives, the goal of the school is to promote learning experience and environment, and to promote respect, diversity, and equity among students, teachers, and community itself. So for our learning areas we have here, first one is the linguistic, of course, because we are talking about English language. So we listed here the objectives, such as first is to differentiate the sources or the theory of origin of language. Second, to rationalize the events occurred in the story of Tower of Babel as basis for the origin of language. Third is to evaluate implications of each sources on the development and evolution of language. And then, lastly, to compare and contrast the different perspective to gain a comprehensive understanding of the language origins. So the subject for that is the origin of language, the natural sound sources, physical adaptation source, tool making source, the genetic source. And then for the students to learn that, of course, we will provide a material such as multimedia resources for visual aids and presentations, and worksheets where the students can practice or can read the topics. So for the learning experiences, of course, first is we will give a explicit discussion on the topic, and it will be followed by activities. So for the evaluation, we will require a research project comparing and contrasting the various sources of language origins. And then we will also require them to submit a project, and we will also give a major exams. So the time allotment for that is 3 hours per week. Okay, so moving on, we have here the second topic under the linguistic, the nature of language, its function, and characteristic. So the subtopic for that, um, for a second. So the subtopic for that is the nature of language, the characteristic of language, the function of language according to Holiday, and the function of language according to Jacobson. So the objective for that is to explain the characteristic and functions of language, to examine how language varies across different contexts, dialect, and speech communities. Third, to apply Holiday's framework to analyze how language is used in different contexts and for different purposes, and to compare and contrast Holiday's and Jacobson's model and of language function. So for that, we will provide a multimedia resources for visual aids and presentation and worksheets, and the learning experiences for that are discussion and followed by activities. So to assess the students' understanding on this topic, we will give a quizzes, assignments, and exams. So that is 3 hours per week as well. Now, moving on to the third topic under the linguistic, we have here the sound and sound patterns of language, phonetics, and phonology. So, under this topic, we have the articulatory phonetics, place or and manner of articulation, phonemes and phones and allophones, minimal pair. So, our objective for that are to identify parts of the vocal apparatus responsible in articulating sound, differentiate phonology from phonetics, apply concept of the sound patterns of language. So for the resources needed, of course, we will need a multimedia resources for visual aids and presentation, followed by worksheets or workbooks. So the learning experiences for that are discussions and activities. And to assess the students' understanding, we will conduct oral recitation, quizzes, assignments, and exam. So the same with the previous topic, this is also good for 3 hours a week. Now, moving on to the fourth topic under the linguistic, we have here the word formation. So, in here, the students will learn how words are formulate. So, under this topic, we have the syntax, principle of syntax, word order, grammatical relations, constituency, constitutes, syntactic structure, and syntactic structure. So our objective for this topic are to identify word formation processes, describe structural relations of word in sentences, and third, to differentiate perspective approaches to descriptive approach. So, of course, the materials needed for that is again multimedia resources for visual aids and presentation containing this topic, and then worksheets or workbooks. And then the learning experiences for that is, of course, discussion and followed by activities. So, to assess the students' understanding whether they understood this topic, we will conduct oral recitation during the discussion or after the discussion, followed by quizzes, assignments, and exams. So, this is also for 3 hours in a week. So lastly, we have here the linguistic and grammar. Under this topic, we have the morphology, semantic, pragmatic, discourse analysis, language in the brain, first language acquisition, and second language acquisition. So our objectives for that are describe the structural ambiguity in a sentence or clause through tree diagramming, analyze the structures of word and how they are formed from smaller units or morphemes, and then understand the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences, study how language is used in various contexts, including pragmatics, discourse analysis, and sociolinguistic, explore the cognitive processes and neural mechanism underlying processing, production, and comprehension, as well as the effect of language related disorders and brain damage, and lastly, to investigate how individuals acquire, learn, and develop proficiency in their first and additional languages, including, of course, first language acquisition, second language acquisition, and bilingualism. Okay, so for the materials needed for that, we have here multimedia resources for visual aids and presentations, worksheets or workbooks, and then the learning experiences for that is our discussions followed by activities. And to assess or to evaluate the students' understanding, we will conduct oral recitation, quizzes, assignments, and exams. So that is also 3 hours in a week. Alright, so moving on to our next topic, we will now talk about the history of English. So under the history of English, of course, we have here the third period, which is the Old English, Middle English, and the Modern English. So we formulate here a lot of objectives to ensure that the students will understand rather the history of English. So we have here first is to develop an understanding on the history of English language, second, to distinguish the three main periods of English, history of English, and identify the main features of Old English, including structure, vocabulary, and pronunciation. Recognize how Old English text looks like. Analyze the literature under this period. Identify the main features of Middle English, including its structure, vocabulary, and pronunciation. Recognize literature existing in this period. Identify the features of modern English, including its structure, vocabulary, and pronunciation. Compare and contrast the features of these three periods and summarize the evolution of English. So for that, the human and material resources needed is laptop, showcasing the history of English. We will also provide examples on how Old English looks like, and of course, the modern English looks like. So we will provide handouts, worksheets, and illustrations, of course. And then the learning experiences for that is discussion and activity. And the evaluation or requirements are quizzes, assignments, projects, and then major exams. And then that is 3 hours and a week. So, after the history of English, we will now recognize the world Englishes or the different Englishes in every country. So, we have here um, the topic under world Englishes is the country's three circles of English. So, our objectives are to recognize the concept of world Englishes, classify the three circles of English by culture, identify the countries under the inner circle, the outer circle, and the expanding circle, and recognize and understand how English spread in the world, compare and contrast the features of different world Englishes, and evaluate the advantage and challenges of using world Englishes in international communication. After that, we will talk about the Philippine English because we also have our own version of English, right? So in here, we will recognize the concept of Philippine English. We will also identify the features of Philippine English, including phonology, grammar, and vocabulary, and evaluate their awareness on the Philippine English. So for that, our resources needed are laptop, handouts, worksheets, illustration, and illustrations. The learning experiences for that are discussion and followed by activity. And for the evaluation, we will give quiz, assignments, projects, and then major exam. So that is also 3 hours in a week. So that is for 2 meetings. And after that, of course, we will now move on to the classes of words. So we will start with noun. So in here, we formulate a specific objectives for that. So we have here develop an understanding on the concept of noun, identify the kinds of noun, analyze the differences of the kinds of noun, gain an understanding on the concept of proper nouns and use them accurately. So we also provided here the kinds of noun so that the students will able um, to learn this topic from the basic. Okay, so demonstrate an understanding of the grammatical function of common noun, explain the differences between concrete noun and other types of noun, develop an understanding on the concept of abstract noun, recognize the characteristic of mass noun, demonstrate an understanding of the grammatical functions of count noun, explain the concept of concrete noun, and identify and use collective nouns accurately. So for that, of course, we will need laptops, handouts, and worksheets where students can practice, of course, and then the learning experiences for that is discussion and followed by activity. So for the evaluation, of course, we will give quiz, assignments, projects, and major exams. So that is 3 times in a week, good for 2 meetings. Okay, so after the noun, of course, we will talk about pronouns. So in here, we also listed the kinds of pronoun, and we've developed a specific objectives for each kinds of pronoun. So we have here develop an understanding on the concept of pronouns, analyze the difference of the kinds of pronouns, recognize the concept of personal pronoun, that is the first kind of pronoun, of course, and then followed by differentiate the 3 types of personal pronoun, gain an understanding on how to use nominative or subjunctive pronouns in a sentence, and con- construct sentences using objective pronouns, and then identify possessive pronouns in text pronouns in a sentence, um, demonstrate an understanding of the grammatical functions of demonstrative pronouns, contra- construct sentences using relative pronouns accurately, recognize the concept of indefinite pronouns, and lastly, to understand and give examples of the interrogative pronouns. So that is for the pronouns, and we will need laptops, handouts, and worksheets, and the learning experiences for that is discussion and followed by activity. And for the evaluation, we will conduct quizzes, assignments. We will also require them project and to take a major exams. So this is also good for 2 meetings or 3 hours in a week. After pronouns, we have here, of course, the verb. So in here, the students will develop an understanding on the concept of verbs, distinguish regular verbs from irregular verbs, identify the kinds of verbs, explain the concept of linking verbs, explain the concept of modals, and list the modal verbs. So we will need laptop, handouts, and worksheets for that. As for the learning experiences, we have here the discussion and activity, and to evaluate whether the students understand the concept of verb and its subtopic, we will conduct quizzes, assignments, projects, and major exams. So that is also good for 2 meetings or 3 hours in a week. So after the verbs, we will now move on to the verbals. So in here, the students will recognize the uses of gerunds, participles, and infinitives, recognize effect of the use of correct verbals in speech and writing, determine the disparity of gerund, participles, and infinitives, and incorporate the correct verbals to their writings. So we will need laptops, handouts, worksheets, and illustrations for that, and then the process of teaching is, of course, we will start with discussion and it will be followed by activity. So to assess whether the student understand the concept of verbals, we will conduct quizzes, assignments, projects, major exam, and drills or practice tests where the student can practice the use of these verbals. So that is also good for 2 meetings or 3 hours in a week. So after that, we will move on to the tenses. So in here, the students will gain a comprehensive understanding on the different verb tenses. They will also be able to explain common verb tenses errors, incorporate tenses naturally into their speech and writing, use appropriate tenses to express themselves, use tenses confidently in public speaking, apply the correct tenses in the given events. So under the tenses is the perfect tenses, past and present perfect, simple past and present perfect, past and past perfect, present perfect progressive, past and past progressive. So we will need laptop, handouts, worksheets, and illustration for this complex topic. We will also need to discuss, and then it will be followed by activity to assess whether the student understand the topic. And then after that, we will conduct quiz, assignment, project, and major exam. Also, a drills or practice test to see whether the student understood the concept on the tenses. So after that, we will talk about adjectives and adverb. So the objectives for that are familiarize the classification of adjectives and adverbs, apply learned words in a real life settings, analyze the difference and significance of the uses of adjectives and adverbs, recognize relative and interrogative adverbs within sentences and understand their function. Okay, so we will need so the subtopics under the adjectives are classification of adjective, of course, adjectives, the articles, classification of adverbs, relative and interrogative adverb, comparison of adverbs, and then we will need laptop, handouts, worksheets, and illustration for that. So for the learning experiences, we will discuss and followed by activity, and then for the evaluation to assess whether the student understand this topic, we will give quiz, assignments, projects, and major exam. So that is also for 2 meetings or 3 hours a week. Now let us move on to conjunctions. So in here, the students will recognize the use of coordinate conjunctions, subordinate conjunctions, and correlative conjunction, apply the appropriate conjunction in speech and writing, determine the disparity of coordinate conjunction, subordinate conjunction, and correlative conjunction. So we will need laptops, handouts, worksheets, and illustration for that. And the learning experiences will be, of course, again, discussion and activity. And then for the evaluation, we will give quiz, assignment, project, major exam, drills, or practice test. And then that is good for 2 meetings or 3 hours in a week. And then after conjunctions, we will proceed with preposition. So our objective is to connect preposition and conjunction and show relation, understand the importance of preposition and how preposition contribute to sentence structure and overall meaning, recognize and apply the list of preposition and express themselves better by using appropriate preposition. Okay, so we will need laptop, handouts, worksheets, or illustrations. And then the learning experiences for that is the same with the previous ones. We will give a explicit discussion and followed by activity. So to assess whether the student understand the topic, we will give quiz, assignment, major exam, drills, or practice test. That is also good for 3 hours in a week. Okay, moving on to the praises. In here, The students will be able to be proficient in using a variety of English phrases to communicate ideas clearly and accurately, recognize and utilize phrases and reflect the cultural nuances and understand the cultural context of different expressions, and incorporate phrases naturally into their speech and writing to improve fluency and coherence, using phrases to express a range of emotions, opinions, and perspectives effectively. So we will need laptops, handouts, worksheets, and illustrations for that. The learning experiences will be, of course, discussion and followed by activity. So for the evaluation, we have here quiz, assignments, major exams, drills, or practice test, and that is good for 2 meetings or 3 hours a week. Okay, moving on to the clauses. So in here, the students will recognize independent clause, main clause, and dependent clause or the subordinate clause within sentences and understand their functions. So we will also make sure that the student will be able to combine clauses to create complex sentences that convey a variety of meanings and relationships, and they will be proficient in punctuating clauses correctly, including the use of commas, semicolons, and other punctuation marks to indicate close boundaries. So we will need laptop, handouts, worksheets, and illustration. And the learning experiences for that is, of course, discussion and followed by activity. So we will give quiz, assignments, and major exam for that. And then we will also give drills or practice tests to ensure that the student understand the concept of clauses. And then this is good for 2 meetings or 3 hours in a week. Okay, moving on to our last topic, we have here the functions of clauses. So in here, the students will be able to recognize and differentiate um, between the various functions of clauses, including subject, predicate, object, complements, and modifiers. They will be able to be proficient in analyzing sentences structures to identify the roles that clauses play in constructing meaning and conveying information, comprehend how clauses interact within sentences to establish relationships such as cause and effect, comparison, contrast, and condition, and understanding how clause function as subject helps learners identify the main focus of a sentence and establish subject-verb agreement, helps students recognize how clauses can function as essential elements in sentence structures similar to nouns, and then lastly, help learners add descriptive details to their writing and create more complex sentences with additional information. Of course, we will need laptops, handouts, worksheets, and illustration for that. And for the learning experiences, we will give, of course, an explicit discussion and followed by activity. And then to evaluate whether the student understand this topic, we will conduct quiz, assignment, major exam, and then drills or practice test. So this is also good for 2 meetings or 3 hours a week. So for the final requirement, we will require them to pass a term paper, and then that is for the entry requirements, by the way. And then for the final requirements is the comprehensive exam. So this is all for our curriculum. So this is all for our curriculum. The final requirements for the CPE 108. I hope we learned something in this presentation. Thank you once again.